So everybody's guessing that China and the United States would be two rivals, and their relations would define international um, environment for many years to come. And so, people in China talking about the Chinese dream, pushed forward by President Xi Jinping. And by the way, when I say President Xi Jinping, he's like to remain president for many years, unless he is uh, toppled from his position as the chairman of the Communist Party, because China is that kind of country, right? I mean, so he might be actually running the country for decades, if not centuries. And but the president of the United States changes every 4 years, and a person can do the president's job for at most 8 years. So that's the difference. But anyway, so President Xi Jinping talks about Chinese dream, and which is great. I live in Tokyo, and China is very close by, and the Japanese people are accustomed to this idea that China is a great country. Actually, the identity of Japan has always been defined in relation to China, because it's a huge country, and it is only in the last 100 years or so that China remained dormant. It is Napoleon Bonaparte who famously said, "Let China sleep." But now China has woken up, and so nobody can stop China. So, well, if you think about it, it's 1.2 billion people, was it? So 1.4 billion? Well, nobody is sure. Probably the Chinese government is not so sure. So, once China wakes up, there's no stopping the Chinese dream. That is good. So President Xi Jinping says that it is important to pursue Chinese dream, and the great resurrection of the Chinese civilization, is probably here to come and here to stay. So that's fine. But it's very interesting to observe that the Chinese dream is probably different from the American dream. And these two dreams, these two great nations have different forms of dreams. And the American dream is very individualistic. Each person pursues his or her dream. That person might come from a very humble environment, background, and he or she might pursue their dream to become a great lawyer, for example, or great medical doctor, or to be a star in the Hollywood movies. And if you make enough efforts, so it is believed in the United States, you can probably realize your American dream. And there are so many self-made person in the United States. So that's a fact. American dream is a fact. It's probably better than buying a lottery, because in buying a lottery, everything is left for the random processes. If you if you can realize your fortune, but if you are making efforts to be somebody, maybe you can be somebody. And even if you can't be somebody, you would learn on the way to be somebody when you make efforts, hard work, and being honest to yourself, and that can reward you in many other ways than social success. So that's the American dream, and there are many films made about it. But the Chinese dream, of course, has some individualistic aspects. But as far as President Xi Jinping is saying it, and as far as the mantra of the Communist Party are concerned, it is a collective dream. I mean, it's just like this idea of the great resurrection or civilization of China is referring to. It is a collective dream of the Chinese nation, Chinese people, rising up from the humiliation of the 100 years, and starting from probably the Opium War. And although this is laudable, I mean, every nation should have and should be allowed to have its own dream on the national level. Americans also talk about this kind of thing too. I mean, Americans really are fond of talking how great a nation America is and all that kind of stuff. especially at American football game or Major League Baseball game or the Olympics, and the American people do love to talk about these collective ideals. But having said that, in the United States, the greatness of America is usually typically perceived as something that is a result of the collective effort of individuals. I mean, so each person has his or her idea about happiness. So in the American Declaration of Independence, it is famously asserted that every person has a right of pursuing happiness, as is perceived by him or her, as far as it doesn't infringe on public welfare. But in China, as far as you listen to President Xi Jinping or these teachings by the Communist Party, the Chinese dream appears to be foremost collective. I mean, of course, the Chinese civilization would experience a really great recovery, but within that, would there be individual differences, individual diversity? I hope there would be, but as far as you listen to what the leaders of the Communist Party are saying, including President Xi Jinping, this diversity or heterogeneity doesn't have appear to be on the forefront, because when you really have this diversity in society, then it is unavoidable that there will be some disagreements. Americans love to disagree. I mean, it is their national pastime. For example, President Trump. I mean, the Americans are not sure who won the election. Of course, hard evidence shows that Joe Biden won the presidential election, but President Trump believes otherwise, and so do many supporters of President Trump who gathered around in the social network app Parler, which has been now discontinued by Amazon putting the brag. And, so you see this heterogeneity of American society, is what makes America great. So when President Trump said, make America great again, it is ironic because he sounded as if he wanted to make America a homogeneous country in which hopefully everybody would support Mr. Trump. But to make America great, America needs to be a diversified nation. Otherwise, America would not be America anymore. But in China, the leaders of the Communist Party seem to start from the assumption that everybody is of the same opinion. Oh yeah, we agree. Yeah, we agree with what President Xi Jinping says. Yeah, well, so there's no such thing as approval rating in China, right? I mean, in Japan, we also have approval rating, and the approval rating of President Suga, sorry, not President, Prime Minister Suga is, falling right now. But we do talk about these things, but I never hear Chinese media discussing the approval rating of President Xi Jinping. So anyway, so it is really interesting that in China, Chinese dream is always talked about in terms of collective values, which is good, but which should not be the only value that people of China would, love to talk, because happiness is different from people to people. Probably, the happiness perceived and dreamed by a person in Tibet will be different from the happiness dreamed by a person in Beijing. For example, happiness dreamed by a person in Tibet might involve the Dalai Lama, which is not a good word to speak if you are living in Beijing. Actually, it is not a good word to speak about even if you are living in Tibet, because of you know what. And so there's no diversity. The same thing can be said about if you are living in Uyghur or Hong Kong or in Taiwan. I'm sorry, Taiwan is a different country, so it's separate from China. But anyway, so Chinese dream is good, but as far as there's no diversity, it is different from the American dream. And if you consider the future of the world, which dream would you think that people in the future would subscribe to? Would they subscribe to the American dream, where individual differences are allowed and promoted? Or would they subscribe to the Chinese dream, where people are kind of gently guided towards this collective idea about what happiness should be by this party, great party, Communist Party? Well, I personally have my answer, but you can decide for yourself. Anyway, I hear that the Chinese people, the Chinese government, thinking that probably they should become a great exporter of culture in the years to come. Everyone knows that in Hollywood, people make films that are loved by many people in the world, and I love American films too, and so probably China would love to do that. I mean, even if China becomes a economically successful country, if Chinese films are not so loved by other people, that would not be a really great situation for the Chinese people or the Chinese government. So would Chinese films be as entertaining as the Hollywood films? Well, I don't know, but as far as there's this collective, tap on what you can dream about. As far as the Chinese government officially acknowledges only, collective happiness and collective recovery of China, and do not as far as the Chinese government does not recognize individual differences. I am afraid that if any film that would come out of China would be dystopian, because well, in a dystopian film, there are no personal differences, and the nation exists without any serious discourse about the personal differences, and even if there are some personal differences, it will be suppressed, and maybe Chinese filmmakers might be able to produce such a masterpiece. And if you remember Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, there's this substance called soma, which makes people happy. Even if individual differences and individual freedom are suppressed, as far as people are given this substance soma, people can become happy. So maybe, I'm not saying this ironically in any sense, but maybe the Chinese government can produce some soma and economic growth and, I don't know, entertainment on the surface level might actually provide the soma for a society where individual differences and individual freedom are suppressed, and people might not actually notice the difference. But we'll see. We'll see if the Chinese government will be able to produce a soma for its people. But I think it is very important to continually review the differences between the American people, American dream, and the Chinese dream. And Japan is uniquely situated between these two great nations, and I hope Japan will be able to nurture its own version of dream and its own approach to diversity, personal freedom, because after all, Japan is a country of 8 million girls, and I think the Japanese people are not so keen on having a nation where there's only one official idea and people are not allowed to express their own opinions. We'll see.